Chapter 19. Little Benny. A loud voice made all the Secret Seven jump. They looked up to see a man walking up to them, a tall, stooping fellow with thick black hair and eyes exactly like Benny's. Luke Bolan. He looked very angry.
"You give me that, poking and prying. I'll box your ears, the lot of you."
"Are you Luke Bolan?" said Peter. "Well, isn't this the violin that was stolen from the antique shop?" There was a scream from behind them, and Mrs. Bolan came flying out of the caravan, Benny behind her. "Luke! Luke! Leave those children be! Don't you dare harm them! Oh, look at that now! They've found the violin!" And to the children's utter dismay, she covered her face with her hands and began to sob. Benny began to sob too, in fright, pulling at her dress. Luke took the violin roughly from Peter and held it up in the air as if he were going to dash it to the ground and break it. But Mrs. Bolan held his arm at once. "No, Luke, no! That would only make things worse. What do you children know about this? How did you find out?" "It's too long a tale to tell," said Peter. "But Colin here actually saw your husband smash the window and take the violin, and he saw that he was wearing our old scarecrow's clothes. And I'm afraid we've just seen them hanging in your caravan. And now, of course, we've found the violin."
"Oh, Luke, Luke, what have you done to us?" wept Mrs. Bolan. "You'll go to prison, sure as the sun is in the sky. And then what's to happen to me and the children? All our things burnt, and me left with the baby and poor little Benny."
Luke put his arms round her, looking very sad indeed. Mrs. Bolan flashed round on the children.
"I was going to put back that violin in the shop this very morning. Yes, that I was. And Luke here, he'll tell you the same. We didn't know it was so valuable. Luke thought it was so old-looking that it wasn't worth much."
"I see," said Peter, suddenly understanding. "Of course, it does look very, very old. But didn't Luke see the notice beside it?"
"Yes," said Luke, "but that didn't mean anything to me."
"Luke can't read,"
said Mrs. Bolan, wiping her eyes.
"He never went to school. He lived in a caravan all the time he was a child, and wasn't anywhere long enough to get schooling. If he'd have seen the notice and read how old and precious the violin was, he'd never have taken it. Would you, Luke?"
"No, I wouldn't," said Luke. "I never thought it was worth more than a few shillings, and I'd not got even those after our shack caught fire. I meant to go in and pay later, but I needed that violin so badly."
"Why? Just because your banjo was burnt?" asked Colin rather scornfully.
"Banjo? No, I didn't care so much about that," said Luke, surprised. "I can always borrow a banjo. No, young man, it was for my Benny I wanted the violin."
"Benny? But surely he can't play a violin," cried Janet, amazed. "Benny, love, do you want to give us a tune?" said Mrs. Bolan, bending over the scared-looking little boy. He couldn't understand what was going on, and he was very frightened. Why was his mother crying? Luke took the violin from the pram, where he had laid it when he went to comfort his wife. He put it into the eager little hands that went out for it, Benny's small brown hands, that seemed to come alive when they felt the smoothness of the old violin. He walked a little way away and stood with his back to them. He put the violin under his chin and raised the bow. And on the air came once again that strange wailing, unearthly and beautiful, that the boys had heard the night before. No tune, just a series of beautiful sounds, as if Benny was singing his own strange thoughts. He's playing to himself, just as the blackbird sings to himself, listening all the time, thought Janet. No, no, Benny. Play the Dancing May Tree, called his mother. Not your own tunes. And straight away the boys swept into the merriest, gayest dance that the children had ever heard. Joyous, breathtaking, astonishing. They gasped in wonder. Mrs. Boland smiled round at them. There, that's an old tune. Benny plays them all. My little Benny. You've never heard him play, have you? Well, we did hear him last night when it was dark, said Peter. And old Matt heard him the night before. But he only played that kind of wailing music of his own, and Matt was puzzled and told us about it. So we came up last night to see if we could hear it too. And we did, said Colin. But we knew at once that it was someone playing a violin most beautifully. And we guessed the violin was a very good one. The stolen one, in fact. Oh, Benny, Benny, and I left you asleep in bed, said Mrs. Boland. And so I did the night before. You got out of bed, found the violin, and took it out to play on the hillside. Is that what you did? Benny didn't answer. He didn't even turn to face his mother. He was rubbing the bow gently on the strings, making a curious sound like the wind in the trees. Janet suddenly realised that that was exactly what he was playing. The actual little song that the wind was whispering in the nearby birch tree. But he's a genius, she thought. I hardly know which is the violin and which is the wind. Then she spoke out loud. Mrs. Boland, Benny's wonderful. He's a little genius. Oh, why don't you send him to school? Why don't you let him be taught music properly? Benny wouldn't be any good at school, miss, said Mrs. Boland, and she drew the child to her. Why, surely you know what's the matter with him. My Benny is blind. Blind? Now the children knew why those great dark eyes had no expression in them, and why Benny was so careful when he walked. Poor, poor little Benny. Music is the only thing that keeps him happy, said Mrs. Boland. And when he lost his own violin in the fire, it seemed as if his heart was broken. That's why Luke took that old violin, just to make our little Benny happy again. Chapter 20.